Welcome to Eight Sided Freaks, and today we are here talking about UFC, and we don't have an upcoming card to preview this week, so we're going to do a little bit of recap on last week's card. It wasn't anything crazy, so we're mainly going to focus on the main event. We'll touch on some other fights with some final thoughts as well, but the rest of the show will pretty much be dedicated to some news, and thankfully, in a week off, the UFC provided us some fight announcements. We've got 5 fight announcements. We're pretty much just going to give our thoughts on the UFC 304 main card that obviously has a lot of English talent. Some of the bigger names in English MMA are being discussed there. And then at the end, we're going to wrap it up with Khalil Rountree pulled out of his UFC 303 fight against Jamal Hill with a tainted supplement. So we're going to provide some potential replacements for Jamal and discuss what that bout could look like, because that is the Conor cards. That is a pretty important spot to fill in, a pretty important fight for whoever fills in. So that is the game plan for today. And let's start off right at the top at UFC Vegas 92, Lerone Murphy and Edson Barboza. We saw Lerone Murphy go out there and get a unanimous decision. 50-45 on some scorecards, 49-46 on some scorecards, dominant all the way through. What did you guys make of Lerone Murphy's performance? Anthony, we can swing it over to you first.
I was very impressed by his performance. As someone that wasn't, I won't say like his biggest fan coming in, but just honestly hadn't seen enough of him, and before this fight, or heading into this fight. But yeah, he looked really good. I think his striking, just walking him down the whole time. I guess essentially maybe you would want to see a finish there, because he had him wobbled so many times. But in Barbosa's defense, he kept firing back and definitely wasn't like completely out of it. He was making it tough out there, but overall, I thought that was a huge win for Murphy, taking out a guy like Barboza, and especially in a main event slot.
Yeah, I'm with you. And just the way he did it, where you kind of implied it, it was like he just walked him down. He kept the pressure on him, used the hell out of his jab, and just kind of, as I said to James before we started this, it was he avoided the dangerous leg kicks that Barboza is known for. Sure, he got caught a couple times. I think it was the 4th round he got hit with 2 spinning kicks. But besides that, he kind of just kept dogging him. And you look at the stats, it's crazy. Lerone Murphy landed more total strikes than Barboza even threw. I want to say it was something like he threw 107 or landed 107 for Murphy through the first 3 rounds, finished with 220 significant strikes. So he kept that going. And that's a big difference for me was Edson Barboza finally looked like age was catching up to him. He looked gassed after that 3rd round, and Murphy just kind of kept walking him down and made a name for himself, and massive win for him, even keeping his record undefeated. And we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, and I really liked what I saw from Lerone Murphy. And to add some background on my thoughts on Lerone, I think 2 years ago when I first started writing for Vendetta, I wrote a post, the best prospect in every division. And some of those worked out well. Some look absolutely terrible in hindsight. But Lerone Murphy was the pick for 145. And I was really high on Lerone Murphy. And then in the 2 years since that post, hasn't fought a lot and has not looked sensational. He's won fights, but he hasn't looked sensational. And he had a really close fight with Gabriel Santos, and now he's 32. And I was like, man, I wonder if this just is never going to click to the point where he's going to start beating really ranked guys just because he doesn't fight enough. Had a lot of injury concerns, some serious injuries that they highlighted on the broadcast. And I was just like, I don't know if we're ever going to see the top version of him, but hey, he went out there and looked outstanding against Barboza, and that's kind of the version of Lerone that I've been waiting on and hoping for, and credit to him for finding that. And he did exactly what he needed to do to win that fight, and I was impressed with his cardio over 5 rounds. Hadn't been in a 5-round fight before, and he goes out there and wins the 4th and 5th round. And even if he was ahead a lot going into those rounds, a lot of other fighters may have gassed out or really got a cardio dump from not getting that finish. So credit to him for getting to that point, and having that cardio in the fourth or fifth round. Those are things I'd love to see. And just from a game plan perspective, his boxing looked good, and he went out there and he got in Barboza's face, and it limited Barboza's ability to throw his kicks and used his kicks. Now Barboza still landed kicks, but Murphy did a good job of keeping it in boxing range and being the boxer that threw more volume and had better hands. So I was really impressed with that. Last thing I'll add, Lerone Murphy got hit with a pretty good up kick at the end of the first round. Looks like that broke his nose, and that as well didn't hold him back. Had some damage going into the second round, but he won that round clearly and started to push the pace even more despite getting hurt at the end of the first round and probably breaking his nose. So lots of credit to Lerone Murphy, because that's exactly what I've wanted him to do in a fight, and he went out there and did it. So hats off to him. And Jerry, you brought it up. Like, I'm very interested to see what they do with him next. What do you guys think are some potential fights for him moving forward? Jerry, we can swing it over to you first this time.
There's just one more thing I want to say just on the fight before I hop into that. He landed 4 takedowns. So it wasn't like he was just standing there boxing him. He was using his boxing to get in close, where we've seen guys who fight Barboza before try and do a similar thing and kind of rush themselves into a takedown and get caught, because Barboza can throw knees, can throw kicks, uppercuts, anything to kind of throw you out of your rhythm. And Murphy did a great job closing the gap and then taking him down when he had to as well. So just wanted to throw that out there. But the fights I'm looking at, and we'll talk on one of these guys later. So since he has a fight booked, I think the Giga Chikadze fight would be a lot of fun. But since he does have a fight booked, I'm looking at Calvin Kattar. I think that would just be an interesting one. Kattar, we kind of saying is that, oh man, what's the word? The gatekeeper of that upper kind of half of the rankings. And he didn't look terrible against Aljamain Sterling by any means. I think Lerone Murphy would be a good one to go against him, or even that Aljamain Sterling fight, because Sterling, I think, still needs to fight someone else. I think he'll end up going up and fighting either a Yair or a Brian Ortega type guy instead. But maybe that, or it'd be tough to say, but like an all England battle between Arnold Allen and Lerone Murphy would be intriguing. I'm wondering if the significance of Murphy's nose and how broken it is and all that, as you said, James, is there's space still on that 304 card. Not necessarily the main card, but the prelims and all that. Could see him fighting in Manchester, where he's from. So,
And to add on that Manchester part real quick, he did say he wanted to turn around and fight at Manchester. He didn't throw out a name, but he did say that he wanted to fight on that date.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I mean, my 2 names are probably Kattar and Giga too. I do like that Giga one, but yeah, I know he's booked. But I was gonna say, the only thing is if he could fight, if he could fight more often and stuff like that. Because I also wouldn't mind a Dan Ige. I know now he's technically Ige's under him, but I mean, you got to do that sometimes, especially when you just finally got the rank number and up here at 11, I think. But so I think Giga and Kattar would be better. They're above him and stuff, or I guess technically under him, but if anything, especially if there's no like an opponent booked for that quick turnaround, if he wants to do it, like I think someone like Ige would be perfect. And then also as time goes by, he can let some of these other fights that are booked play out, and then bang, you might have a matchup in like top 7 or something.
Yeah. So I would like to see him move up in the rankings, and Calvin Kattar one was one that really stood out. The other one was Josh Emmett. I don't really know what the UFC really plans to do with Josh Emmett. He's kind of in a weird spot and coming off a really good win, but prior to that, they were kind of using him as a gatekeeper, especially in that Taporia fight that felt like a clear gatekeeper spot. I'd be curious to see if they would give him their own, or if they're looking a little bit higher in the ranks for Josh Emmett. Another idea is very similar to Anthony, what you said, like maybe if they're running him out there for 304, you can't get that guy ranked ahead of you. And a guy who's been fighting very frequently is Diego Lopez. So I'd be interested to see if that's a fight they would book. At the same time, Lerone Murphy, Diego Lopez feels like a main card fight. But maybe they just say screw it and throw it on the prelims, and we have ourselves a stat card. But That I think is one that seems kind of realistic, and then your winner gets, a serious bump up the rankings depending on how that fight goes. And I think that would be one that you could probably get signed on the dotted line for 304.
You bring up Diego Lopez. I do like that shout. And yeah, that would be a great featured prelim or just a crazy deal. Let's go back to the old UFC where you have kind of a bracket style. Let's do to start out the 304 card. Lerone Murphy, Diego Lopez, Giga Chikadze, Arnold Allen. Let them fight early and then let the winners open up that main card. Why not? Let's see a little bracket stuff.
If there's ever a time they bring that back.
I wish. Okay, well, after the Murphy performance and Diego Lopez, obviously after his last couple, I'd hope they keep them away from each other a little bit to get rid of some maybe the older guys. But then, if they do book that, I think the winner should, like you said, and even more emphasis, a serious bump after that, because I think you're taking two the new contenders, and so yeah, I think that would be a serious bump to hopefully be a fight or two away from a title.
Yeah, and I will say this division is in a really interesting spot with new champion. Who's he going to defend the belt against? And then that kind of turns into, do we book Sterling versus Evloev? What do we do with Ortega? What do we do with Emmett? And then at the same time, you've got quite a few fights already booked, like that Giga and Arnold Allen one. You've got Rodriguez hanging around. This division is always a great division, but it feels like we're in an interesting spot where we've got some new names that can start fighting you guys like Yair, Ortega, Sterling's in the mix. So I just want to add that as well while we're talking about this division as a whole. I really like where this division is, and I think we're going to get some fun fights out of this division for the foreseeable future, but also the immediate future. I think is going to be pretty fun in the next, we'll say 6 months, for example.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Like I said at the top of the show, we won't go too deep on this card as a whole, just because it didn't have a ton of massive fights or ranked fights, but there actually was a decent amount of solid performances that we can talk about. So we've got some options here for some final thoughts. Jerry, let's throw it over to you first, and you can give us a final thought on UFC Vegas 92.
One of the final thoughts, and this was kind of my final thought before when we did the preview, but I was so curious to see what Umar Sy looked like, and none of us really knew much about him. I think it's safe to say. So He came in, got the first round submission, and looked good doing it. Obviously, Tuco Tacos isn't the best guy in the world by any means, but you made the UFC and you made your first fight look relatively easy. You took him to the ground, kind of just worked his way around to eventually getting the submission, and I would say he looks relatively quick for a light heavyweight on the ground.
I thought his grappling looked good too. I'm not saying he's going to be anything special, but I marked him down as someone that's next time he fights, I got to make sure I get an eye on him because there may be something there, but I need to see a little bit more, but good debut for sure.
I do also have a question just because I didn't see much of the fight card by any means. There was a disqualification. What happened in that fight?
Yeah, basically Pierre Rodriguez was beating up on Ariane Carnelosi pretty bad. Pierre Rodriguez lands a small headbutt, and then the ref says, hey, don't headbutt her. Then she lands a big headbutt, and then the ref DQ'd her. And Ariane Carnelosi probably could have kept fighting, but she was getting beat up pretty bad, so she took her DQ win and
fair enough.
Went on with her day.
and then enjoyed Vegas for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
No, my quick one would be Adrian Yanez. I'm a big Adrian Yanez fan. Tough after his last couple fights, but I think there was a dip in competition, obviously, which we thought was kind of the idea behind the fight a little bit. Not a tune-up necessarily, but definitely some difference compared to the two dogs he was fighting the last two times in the octagon. And he did what he needed to do. I mean, it's not like a oh my god he's back performance because there wasn't enough. You need to see a little bit more striking for that. But I mean, he went in there and he got the finish pretty quickly. So at least if anything, it's better for him and his confidence to get in that next fight. So I'm interested for his next matchup. And then Probably last one real quick would be I ended up switching off Chaos and going the Harris in that fight. And I liked what Harris was doing actually with some of the striking exchanges. And then Chaos Williams just has the death touch. And literally watched him sit back on one punch, and that one punch, when it landed, put his lights out. So it's awesome. I think that's always amazing. I would love to be able to do that as a human being. Just literally put people to sleep. But that was a pure Chaos Williams like to a T performance right there.
Yeah, something when Chaos Williams has one of those, it's not lasting very long. I think that's his third and under like 2 minutes, like out of like 6-7 fights in the UFC. I agreed with a lot of what you guys said. So I won't add too much. I will shout out Angela Hill. Fairly good performance. Locked up a guillotine in the second round. Did what she needed to do. Avoided the judo. Didn't get hit with big shots. Waited for Pinheiro to slow down a little bit. Then she goes out there, wraps up the gilly, gets the sub in round 2. 39 years old, and she looked pretty good in that fight. I'm not saying she's gonna, become the UFC champion, but hey, she keeps hanging around. I think she has the most fights all time of any woman in the UFC. So credit to her. And she keeps kind of rolling at this point in her career. So I thought she looked good, and not really much of a sign that she's going to start declining. But at the same time, you never know. It could happen at a drop of a hat. So credit to her while she's still at this level.
Yeah, I mean, won back-to-back fights now, and she moved up 3 spots in the rankings. So, hey, crazier things have happened than a very late title run. We saw it with Glover, and it happens, but I'm with you. I don't see it happening with Andrew.
That would be amazing.
Sean O'Malley won a belt, excuse me, not Sean O'Malley. Sean Strickland won a belt. Sean Strickland won a belt. So I will never put anything past anyone. All right, moving on to 304, because Dana White announced this entire main card, and 3 of these fights are new. 2 of them were kind of rumored and speculated, but I'm not sure that they were signed on the dotted line. So let's start at the top. Leon Edwards, Belal Muhammad. This is one that, hey, I think we all saw coming. But now that it's finally here, what are your guys' reactions to Leon and Belal headline in UFC 304? Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead this off.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we kind of knew this was going to happen. There just wasn't many places to go at this division at this time. We've joked countless amount of times. I have that, and the internet just in general has joked about Belal Muhammad main events and boring fighters and stuff. But overall, I think this is, I'm fine with it. I'd like to see Leon Edwards back and defend his belt. I really enjoy watching him fight. And Belal Muhammad earned it. So at the end of the day, you can't get complete fireworks every fight, but not to say that this, this is going to be bad by any means, because from what I remember, it was 1 round, but I remember I was kind of there for that first time they were fighting. I think I was interested, so they get the little rematch. Belal Muhammad can stop complaining about it on Twitter now, and we'll see. And then Edwards fighting for his home crowd. So.
Oh yeah, we all knew this was happening, but I'm gonna say I like Leon Edwards a lot, and I just don't want to see this fight be a boring one and see an eye poke in the first couple rounds again. But man, if this is a Belal fight, like we've seen Belal fights, I feel so bad for the English crowd when this fight kicks off at 4 or 5 in the morning after a long night of fights. It's might be a snoozer that puts some people to sleep, but it's because even when Belal was talking about it a couple weeks ago, he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna rock him a couple times, then I'm gonna win by unanimous decision." Even in a fantasy world, why are you ever thinking, yes, I'm going to win by unanimous decision? Let's go. But hey, a win's a win. It doesn't matter how you get it. So he's, like you said, Anthony, he's won however many in a row. He does what he has to do to get the win. So can't knock him for that too much.
Yeah. I doubt the excitement for this fight will be through the roof by any means. Conor McGregor did a live stream yesterday, and they were asking him questions about specific fights and fighters. And they asked him about this, and he said, well, you've got Leon, who loves his decision, and Belal goes to decision just about every time. So I'm sure this is going to be a great fight. I expect it to do 200,000, probably more like 150,000 pay-per-view buys if they decided to put it on a pay-per-view. So I believe that is the mindset that a lot of people are going to have. But at the same time, you have to give this fight to Belal just based off what he's done. Like, these are just fights that, hey, it may not be one that jumps off the page as this is going to be fight of the year, but at the same time, it's a fight that needs to be made. And I will also add that the first round of their first fight wasn't like, it wasn't bad by any means. If Belal can get in Leon's face and really get active, it'll really get some shots out of Leon, who likes to counter strike. So I do think there's actually a world where this surprises people and it is a fun fight. But that said, it's not a guarantee that we've got a classic on our hands here. So I think it's a good fight, and I think it's an interesting matchup, and I'm glad to see this belt get defended. We can move on from this, because this has kind of been the thing that everyone's been, oh, well, eventually we're going to get Leon and Belal. It's nice to have it signed. We know when the fight's going to take place. It's nice to kind of get the division rolling at the top again. So no really complaints from me, and I'm glad that we finally got this booked and signed, sealed, and delivered.
I just want to bring up one other thing, because you mentioned Conor McGregor and his live stream. Don't know if you saw Leon Edwards' comments about fighting McGregor of, hey, Leon comes out, he's going to win against Belal. McGregor's going to be Michael Chandler. Let's give McGregor a chance at a third title in Madison Square Garden, where he got his second belt. It's possible in the UFC. Anything's possible with Conor McGregor. So I wouldn't be surprised one bit, but that'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think Conor and Leon are on the same page on that one. Let's see if the UFC is on the same page. That's where my question lies. And in Conor's live stream, he was kind of like, yeah, I already won the 155-pound belt. Why would I really want to cut down there and do that again? Which I don't really agree with that, but that's what he said. He said the two things I haven't had are the BMF and the 170. So those are two fights that I think are possible. So you never know.
Yes.
And it all depends on what happens in that Chandler fight. There's a world where Conor cleans him in a minute, and Conor's the hottest thing in the UFC once again, and we just got to see it happen. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't.
Just on that, imagine the scenes if we see what happened to Tony Ferguson happen to Conor McGregor.
I just think it's how crazy of, like, at the top Conor was. Now it's 2024, and he's talking about wanting the BMF belt. It's like, oh, yes, I've had the 145 and the 155, but I haven't had that BMF belt yet. It's like, okay, Conor.
It is crazy how we got here.
Yes. It's like you were the chosen one, but it's fine.
First person to ever win 4 belts.
Yeah.
BMF, 145, 155, 170. Heard it here first.
That'd be something. That would be something. All right. Moving on to a fight that I think people are a lot more interested in, Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blaydes. This one has been more of a secret, because it's like, is Tom going to defend that interim heavyweight title? Is it going to be Curtis if he does? Is it going to be Ciryl Gane if he does? Come to find out, we've got Aspinall, Blaydes, interim heavyweight title fight, UFC 304. Jerry, what are your thoughts on Tom defending the belt and doing it against Curtis?
Similar to how it was with Leon and Belal, where that fight in the first time around got stopped early due to injuries. This one did too, and Aspinall popped his knee, tore his ACL or something like that. I'm excited for this one. I think this is going to be one that gets the crowd pumped up. It's going to be a really fun fight. Two big guys going at it, dangerous on the feet, can be dangerous on the ground. This is the people's main event, I would say. But I'm still surprised that I know Aspinall wants to keep fighting, but I think it's funny that this is the fight that they made and that is this soon, because who knows? Maybe this lines up perfectly for the winner of this. Something happens to John or something happens to Stipe. do it at Madison Square Garden, the winner of this against whoever's healthy of that, maybe. But I'm just glad it's not Cyril gone. He's had his chances at interim titles. He's had his chances at real proper titles, and he's always fallen short. So I don't think he deserves it. He was offered this fight for the interim belt against Tom Aspinall, then declined it, said, he wants to fight John Jones for the real belt again, or Stipe for the belt, or something stupid. But I'm glad it's this. Also kind of surprised that, maybe a little surprised that we aren't seeing Alex Pereira fighting, but there's just all that talk about that.
Yeah, I like. I didn't know about the gun thing, but I agree. I like the little Blaydes finally with a chance to at least in a while, it feels like, against Aspinall for the belt. It's for the interim, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say real quick, I was wondering why, because especially how the UFC loves to put heavyweights as main events, why this isn't just a main event, but I can see, because a belt compared to an interim. But yeah, no, I'm excited for this. I was excited the first time, kind of like you said, and then extremely disappointed when it was like in the first minute he blew his knee out. But I think overall this is just it's a good matchup. Should be fun enough. Blaydes has a real chance to do something, and if not, Tom Aspinall, I feel like not only getting a win in front of your home crowd, but say it's a really good one or spectacular, just gives him even more praise, we'll say, from the UFC community. But then fans and stuff can put even more pressure on the UFC to like finally give him his chance, because I know he's been kind of put on the back burner with the whole John Jones and Stipe thing.
Yeah, I agree. Tom has really gotten screwed here with this Stipe and John thing, and the writing was kind of on the wall the second he won that interim title. Like, John was injured, and everyone knew John wanted to fight Stipe, and Stipe wanted to fight John. So here we are, and this fight has massive implications. I know it's an interim title fight, but like the winner may fight John or Stipe if they decide to keep fighting. And in a situation where the winner of that fight decides to walk away, now they immediately get elevated to the undisputed champion. So the winner of this fight could actually be the undisputed champion without ever fighting again. So like this fight is like, in terms of interim title fights, like this is massive, like in comparison to some of the previous interim title fights we've seen. They're all pretty big because you're usually lining yourself up for a big opportunity. But I think this one is just a little bit different. And for Tom, if you beat Pavlich and then beat Blaydes like back to back to win the interim and then defend the interim, like that puts you in a pretty good spot for whatever it is he does next. So I do think this is a crucial fight, and I do think it will also be an entertaining fight. I think it's an interesting stylistic matchup just because there aren't a ton of fighters that fight like Aspinall in this division. There aren't a ton of fighters that fight like Blaydes in this division. Like, there aren't very many wrestlers that go out there that have been developing their striking. They go out there and have serious ground and pound in this division. And there aren't very many guys with the movement of Aspinall and the well-rounded skill set. So I think that makes for a fun fight at the absolute minimum. So I'm glad they booked this, but I do also kind of feel for Tom just because he shouldn't have to take this fight. So I'm a little 50-50 on it in that regard.
I will say my only concern, and I know this isn't a fight preview or anything, and I don't want to make it anything like that, but Curtis Blaydes looked rough in that first round against Jailton Almeida. Tom Aspinall does really well in the first round. This fight could be over quickly, and if it is Tom at home in Manchester, the crowd will be electric, and then hopefully they can keep the energy, and maybe Belal and Leon feed off that and make a really interesting, exciting fight.
I also think real quick that it's funny you said, because he beats Pavlich, beats Blaydes right here. When he actually has the belt and it's time to defend, there might be no one good to fight. So he might go on a little run here, unless they'll give Cyril another shot too. After Cyril beats some of the couple other bad heavyweights. But I just thought that was funny. Yeah,
they're gonna book Gan and Tybura in Paris, and Gan's gonna knock him out. And
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like clockwork, actually, with this division.
Yeah. And like even the other guys at the top, like the winner of Pavlovich and Volkov, they're fighting in Saudi Arabia relatively soon. That's this month. The winner of that fight, yeah, you're in a great position. But if Tom wins, he's beat them both, and he beat Volkov bad. Like, well, he beat Pavlovich bad too. He knocked him out in the first round, but he like thoroughly outclassed Volkov. Like, washed him terribly. So the winner of that fight's like, yeah, here we are staring down a title fight. And it's like, no, you both already got cleaned by the guy holding the interim belt, who maybe becomes a champion. So I'd be really interested to see what this division looks like for Aspinall if he's winning some of these fights. All right, this next fight, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green. I was kind of surprised they booked this. I thought there was a chance it was Renato Moicano. But you think for a second about it, and you're like, oh, it makes sense why we're doing Bobby Green. I kind of see what this is. This is the UFC getting Paddy a ranked fight in his home, or I believe no, he's from Liverpool.
In Liverpool.
Not his hometown, but his home country. They'll be supporting him there, I'm sure. And you go, well, what's Bobby Green good at? Bobby Green's good at striking. What's Bobby Green not good at? Well, he's an okay defensive grappler, but he's nothing special. You can out-grapple him. Paddy's a grappler, and he hits hard on the feet. Well, Bobby Green got knocked out senseless by Jalen Turner. Got knocked out before that by Drew Dober. And in this last fight, even though he dominated Jim Miller, every time he got hit by Jim Miller, he got hurt. So they gave him a guy that's a suspect defensive grappler with a terrible chin. They definitely just looked at the rankings and said, all right, what is the best chance that we have to get Paddy a ranked win? And Bobby Green. All right, send it, sign the contract, send him out, and that's where we are. That's my thought on this fight. Am I off on this? I will say I do think it's going to be a good fight, but that's kind of what I think is going on here. Jerry, we can swing it over to you. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
I also don't think this fight happens if Bobby Green doesn't call him out at UFC 300, because there was that whole thing and called him out there. It does feel like they're giving Paddy a ranked fighter to try and beat, but there's not many harder guys than Bobby Green at times. Bobby Green could just show up and just beat the living breaks off you like he did Jim Miller. Sure, he got caught a couple times, but it never seemed to phase him too much. He kept going forward. Regardless, it is Jim Miller, and he's old as dirt now, but so is Bobby Green. But I feel like this one could potentially have been the opener of the main card, or even the featured prelim if they wanted another ranked fight. But Paddy Pimblett, I'm curious, because there's a 50-50 shot that the crowd absolutely boos the hell out of Paddy Pimblett. You guys probably don't know as much, but it's like Liverpool and Manchester. That rivalry between those two cities goes back forever. In soccer, massive rivals between the two, probably each other's biggest rivals. Anything from Liverpool, Manchester hates. Anything from Manchester, Liverpool hates. So there's a world where this crowd is booing Paddy Pimblett when Bruce Buffer says, fighting out of Liverpool, England, and the crowd might just turn on him there. Also going to be a lot of just English folk there in general, but I think it'd be crazy and really funny to see Paddy Pimblett just get booed in his own country by his rival fans.
Yeah, well, okay. I was going to say, I think I 100% agree. This is probably the safest pick for Paddy. They're still trying to protect him, which is hilarious because most of the times when they have, these big hype trains and they protect them, they've popped by now. But Paddy's past couple performances hasn't allowed that to happen. And so while I know some people are off on him, I'm still fine with him. I kind of enjoy still a Paddy fight week, or sometimes it's not as fun as they were. But I still like it, and I hope he can get back to that one day. And I was going to say this could be a perfect opportunity to do it at home, but maybe if he's going to get booed now, then maybe not. But no, I still think overall it should be a little bit more energy though. And then, I agree with Jerry that Bobby Green sometimes for sure is tough style, and he can just confuse people, and also very skilled too. So sometimes he can really put it on you. But I do think so. I think both are true. I think that Bobby Green can be a tough out, but I still think this is a very safe and protected fight that they picked for Paddy. And overall, I think it could be a good one though. So I'm still excited.
Yeah, I will say, like I said, I think it's the best possible matchup for Paddy inside the top 15. But at the same time, I still think there's a level of intrigue to it. And Anthony, like you said, with Paddy Pimblett fight weeks, well, if there's anyone that can spice up a Paddy Pimblett fight week, it's Bobby Green. I can only imagine what those two are going to be saying to each other at the press conference. Those might be polar opposite in terms of types of people. They're on different ends of the spectrum. They don't hold very many similarities. So I think that kind of contrast between them is going to create a very, very fun fight week and press conference for Paddy. And maybe that, and then maybe on top of that, he goes out there and gets an impressive win. Like maybe all of a sudden, Paddy Pimblett's stock is as high as it's ever been, just based off those two things. So I do think there's a chance that happens depending on how that fight week goes and how his performance goes.
Wait, and then where's the fight at?
In
Manchester.
Manchester, right? And so Paddy's Liverpool.
Yeah.
Okay, Bobby Green should definitely pull up to the press conference stuff in like a Manchester jersey and stuff like that.
If he rolls up wearing a Man U jersey, the crowd is going to go crazy, and he will have the entire arena on his side.
That would be my game plan.
That's what I'm rooting for.
Looking at the odds right now, I was just looking out of curiosity. Bobby Green's minus 205 on one of these apps. So.
Oh wow.
I see it. Like I could see the logic of watching the Jared Gordon fight and then going, he's getting outboxed by Jared Gordon. I think he'll get outboxed by Bobby Green. I follow the logic. I see how they got to that number.
They also did look great against Tony Ferguson, but
yeah, and that's a similar number to where he was at, to where Bobby was at against Jim Miller. And I think the logic was very similar. Jim Miller is a grappler who hits hard, but he's not going to be able to box as well. But Jim may catch him. Because he was coming out that knockout loss. So I think that's actually very similar logic to both of Bobby's last fights. That doesn't mean he comes out here and wins this one. I'll probably pick him to win, but, it's still a different fight. You still have to go out there and execute the game plan for a second time in a row. All right, this next fight is also an important fight. Muhammad Mokaev versus Manel Kape. They did not come out and say this is a title eliminator, but if I had to guess, the winner of this is staring down a title shot. It's not like they're ranked 1 and 2, but Mokaev was in the discussion for the last one, and they've wanted to give Manel Kape a title shot for ages, but outside of the octagon reasons have prevented them from doing so. What do you guys make of this matchup? Mokaev, Kape, Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
Well, yeah, I agree. First, like you said, that they're not 1 and 2, but we just saw someone fight that was like 9 or 10. So that clearly, just the way the flyweight division is right now, it just doesn't matter. But I mean, yeah, I'm excited. I know Kape, it's hard to get some fights in there and stuff, and Mokaev as well. So I think it's like we always say when it comes to flyweight, this is should be a good fight that will hopefully spice up the division, just add more names toward the top to where we can, get some variety in there, so we're not seeing the same people fight the same people. And especially with these two, I think this would be good for a main event like this on this type of card to get some more recognition and names out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is kind of that title eliminator. Just because this division's such a shit show at the top. Pantoja's beat Royval, 3 times now? Moreno 2 or 3 times. He's beat Alex Perez. Amir Albazi's not getting a title shot. Kai Kara-France still needs a couple wins. This seems like that title eliminator where the winner of this gets the next shot at Pantoja. Feels like Mokaev has been coming and he's kind of been inevitable to get a title shot at some point. My big concern is on the Manel Kape side. This Manel Kape fight week is never over until he is standing in the octagon or making the walk to it at least. Anything can happen at any point. That's what his issue's been so far. Didn't he got DQ'd or suspended or?
He had a bad weight cut. He got suspended once. Yeah, I think he's pulled out with an injury at least once.
So
I
it's
see
one of those things that
6 cancellations since 2022.
yeah. And he's fought Pantoja before, so I think this is kind of paving the way for either a rematch or Muhammad Mokaev to get it done. And he resides in Manchester, so another hometown guy there for it. Also a Dagestani, so we kind of know what to expect here in terms of the Mokaev side of things.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's going to be a title eliminator. And while we're talking about fight week, Manel Kape is a guy who can really spice up fight week. We saw it at the Izzy Sean fight. We were supposed to fight Kai France. Kai France pulls out. That press conference got a little crazy. I'm not sure that there's going to be a guy that he really extends his aggression towards other than Mokaev in this spot. But I think we may be in for a pretty crazy press conference with Mokaev, Manel Kape, Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green. The other guys are pretty calm, but those 4 are could bring some chaos. You never know with Belal Muhammad. That may be a little bit more orchestrated trash talk that you're kind of like, all right, what are we doing here? But I
Gonna
think
look
we could
down
get
at a piece of paper and then look up.
yeah, he's reading off a script. Yeah. But I think like these 2 fights here in the middle of the card could be really entertaining in terms of some pre-fight build up. And on top of that, it's like an actual good fight, stylistic clash, title eliminator. So I think this is a good booking, and I think Manel Kape is one of the more entertaining guys in this division. So I'm not going to complain when he gets a fight booked at all. So I like where we're at right now with this card. Last fight on the main card, Arnold Allen, Giga Chikadze. I love this fight. Several times we've talked about the featherweight division, and I've said very positive things about Arnold Allen. I know he's on a slide, but that slide is reflective in a drop in the rankings to fight Giga. Giga coming off a win over Alex Caceres, moving up in the rankings. These 2 are meeting here. Arnold Allen will be the home countryman from England. What do you guys make of this featherweight scrap? Jerry, I believe it is your turn to start us off.
I don't know which way this fight's going to go because I don't know what kind of Arnold Allen's going to show up. Don't know what kind of fighter Giga Chikadze is going to show up. But I do like this fight. I really am high on Arnold Allen. I have been for a while now, and he's lost 2 straight. But I'm still on the side that he should never have gotten that Max Holloway fight when he did. I think he needed 1 more to get that Holloway fight because he kind of got run out of the building there, and then looked good at moments against Movsar Evaloyev, but obviously Evaloyev got the decision win as well. Giga Chikadze is a dangerous striker. Arnold Allen's decent on the feet, but I want to say he's more of a ground guy at times, so it's one of those things that I don't know which way this fight's going to go, but I'm excited for it and to see what it can do to shake up this already stacked division.
Yeah, I think this is a great pick for your little 6-9 matchup. Allen's. I lean Allen, but also I like Allen a little bit more. I think. I know Giga had that slide too. I just thought he was a little overhyped in the beginning from the start, but not to say I don't find him entertaining as a fighter either. So overall, I just think this is a good matchup. It should be entertaining, and it's actually, this could be a little low-key banger placed on a big main event, big pay-per-view card like this too, which could be good for the flow of the card as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good fight, and I'm also on the camp that Giga Chikadze was overrated during the UFC, and we got a little bit too crazy. Not we, because we weren't doing this when Giga Chikadze was rising, but the MMA community as a whole got very high on Giga for not quite the right reasons. And I think this is a tough fight for him. I think Arnold Allen, go watch the Kelvin Cater fight 5 times in a row and then go to the gym and go, all right, let's practice what Kelvin Cater did. I think he's got a pretty good shot to win this fight. But that being said, Giga, 1 kick to your liver and you may drop. Very good kicks, and you got to be careful with them. But I think this is a good fight for Arnold Allen. I really like Arnold Allen. Like, even in those 2 losses to Evloev and Holloway, who I think are both undisputed top 5 guys, and depending on how you look at it, top 3, 4, like they're both really good fighters. And Evloev, difficult clash with the grappling. He hadn't fought a heavy grappler in ages, and Max Holloway is one of the best strikers on the planet. And he's either the best striker in this division or the second best striker in this division, and hopefully we find that out in a fight. So I'm not going to hold those too much against Allen. And it's not like he got whitewashed in either of those. It's not like he got finished in the first round. Competitive fights, even though he clearly lost both. So I still like Arnold Allen a lot and think this is a good fight for him to get back on track a little bit. So, and I think it rounds out a very good main card. Like this card's depth, UFC 304 in comparison to the upcoming UFC 302 and the Conor 303. I think the depth on this card from 1 to 5 is pretty deep in comparison to those cards.
Oh, absolutely. They're breaking in the new, well, whatever the hell the arena is, the Co-op Live Arena in Manchester, first sporting event that the arena is going to host. And Dana loves setting the gate record at any venue, so I'm sure he'll do it again this time.
Yeah, he's at the press conference. Yeah, guys, we set the gate record. We'll have to see if he mentions that it is the first gate for a sporting event. We'll see if he mentions that, but he does. Dana does love those gate records every single time after they're on the road at all, even if it's a fight night. It's one of the first things that gets brought up is that a good old gate number.
Also,
go ahead, Anthony.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I was looking at the 304 card again. I'm happy with it. This 303 is not true though, right? It's like I'm looking at Conor McGregor, and then it says the co-main's Joe Pyfer.
I don't think they have the order set for that.
Okay,
but I don't think there's very many options for 303. To be honest,
horrible.
I believe right now the hope is that to add Ian Gary and Michael Venom Page for that card, and that gives you a co-main. I believe that's the hope.
Yeah.
And then but then to be fair, if you find Jamal Hill another opponent, then that's great for another main card fight. But yeah,
that gives you 3 good fights, and then we'll have to see what they do with the 4th and 5th spot. I wouldn't be surprised if they go Joe Pyfer and Peyton Talbot to really sell some of those prospects.
I've been seeing at least the discourse online. They're really trying to give Peyton the boost a little bit, which is interesting.
Yeah, they love Peyton Talbot, and just we're talking about Peyton Talbot. The striking, he can strike. I'm still a little concerned about the grappling, but maybe he fights 4 strikers in a row, doesn't have to test the grappling, and that whole time he's been in the lab working on the grappling defense, and then he runs into a grappler and he can defend the takedown. So we'll have to wait and see, but I will say at this point in time, I am a little wishy-washy on the grappling, a little concerned.
Whatever the UFC wants for him, we'll see. We'll see with the opponents.
Yeah, I mean that Pyfer Barrio fight is gonna be fun. I just want to put that one out there. But looking at because we're talking about how 304 had that depth and how 303 doesn't. There's one massive difference between those two. Conor McGregor. You could throw 10 of us sitting in the octagon to round out the main card, and people would still buy that pay-per-view if it was Conor McGregor fighting. When it's a late night, early morning card in England with Belal and Leon Edwards, obviously Leon has a huge backing there, but not a lot of people around the world of MMA respect his style at times, respect Belal's style at times. They need to make that more stacked, in my opinion, to make it people buy that pay-per-view, make people buy tickets to go see it. Whereas this, Conor McGregor, we're set. He returns. It doesn't matter what else happens. And this is what we've talked about before of why you have a main event of 2 guys who are unranked in a new division.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And as well, on top of that, anyone that wants evidence of that, go look at Conor's fight card against Cowboy. That was rough. The co-main was Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington in a non-title fight. It wasn't a great one.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm looking at this right now. This is brutal.
Yeah, it's bad. And sometimes cards age well too, because sometimes you put a guy on there and he eventually becomes ranked, and you can look back on it and go, oh, well, they had so-and-so. At the time, no one knew who they were, but even going back and looking at that card, it's like, oh, geez. That one didn't age well. It wasn't good at the time. It wasn't anything.
We complain about.
Oh, go ahead.
We complain about the UFC not trying on these certain fight nights. They put in the least amount of effort on a Conor McGregor led pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at this or like the prelims, the only names that are kind of still around and doing a bunch, Sadiq Youssef, I think, still ranked. Is Askarov still ranked, or did he get cut out of the UFC?
Nah, he's fighting in Russia.
Okay, that's what I thought. And then Macy Barber. And Macy Barber lost that fight, so.
Oh, was that when she blew her knee out?
No, that was when was that against Roxanne
Modafferi?
Yeah, that was that fight, but it went to unanimous decision.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, she blew her knee out, then she got taken down, and then it became just
That's
nothing.
right.
And then the doctor in between rounds was like checking her knee out, and she was like, "What are you doing right now? Please stop."
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Macy Barber as well got a fight booked against Rose Namajunas.
I saw that
in Denver.
Main event in Denver. Rose moved to Denver, trains out of Denver. Macy Barber from Denver moved away from Denver to train. So I don't know who the crowd's going to be rooting for. They're going to have to figure that out by themselves.
I think isn't Macy Barber a Team Alpha male right now or no?
Mm-hmm. I think so. Or she was at one point.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right. What we were talking about 303. Last piece of news on the docket is Khalil Rountree out of UFC 303, which spoils one of those fights. He was supposed to fight Jamal Hill. He's out. He announced on Instagram that he took a tainted supplement. According to him, he's got a whole company that he trusts that like organizes and does all of his supplement stuff. Like he pays them. So it sounds like they should actually be able to trace down the tainted supplement. And there's like evidence that it was tainted. It's not just him popping for something and going, it was a tainted supplement. So obviously, who knows? That's going to have to get figured out with Khalil and the UFC drug testing agency. But for the time being, he's out of UFC 303, which is massive for him. Fighting a former champion on a Conor McGregor card. If he won that fight, he was going to get a shot at Alex Pereira, and that's a great fight for the fans from an entertainment perspective. Now we're talking about replacement opponents for Jamal because Khalil's out. So feel for Khalil. But as we look at the state of the light heavyweight division, are there any names that stand out to you guys as like, oh, I'd love to see this guy step up? Jerry, I believe it is your turn to lead us off.
I mean, that division's just so weird because it's so many guys at the top who've all just fought each other before. I think we're still waiting to see what happens of Magomed Ankalaev, Yuri Prochazka, see if those guys are going to fight Alex Pereira upcoming. Otherwise, you have Jan Blachowicz, Alexander Rakic. There's some guys who could step up and fight Jamal Hill. It's just kind of whether or not they actually do. So, and who knows? I think there's a world where Khalil Rountree, everything's like fixed in time and that fight just does happen. But I think that's best case scenario. Otherwise, I don't mind like a Jan Blachowicz fight against him. Something to give us a decent, solid co-main. Unless we get my other side of thinking in this is they're out. Give me some combination of Ian Gary, Michael Venom Page, Colby Covington, because all those guys kind of want to fight each other. Or at least they say they do.
I think that just to add on to the Ian Gary part real quick, I listen to Sean Brady's podcast every once in a while. I listened to his most recent episode. And he was basically like, hey, me and Ian Gary have the same manager. I told him I'll fight Ian Gary anytime. And that they told me they didn't need me. So I'm pretty sure sounds like Ian Gary has a fight booked. And worst case scenario, they call Sean Brady. So it sounds like he's going to be on that 303 card, and that makes sense considering Conor McGregor's the OG Irish UFC fighter, Ian Gary the next gen Irish UFC fighter. So I think that will end up being the co-main event. It's going to be Ian Gary versus somebody.
Yeah.
I was
going to say, if you have something on this card, go ahead. I have some other news that kind of just came out and referring to the Saudi Arabia card, but
Okay, let's
Oh,
finish this up, and then we'll definitely add
okay.
that in here.
Because I was gonna say, I like the Jan pick. That was for the names that are jumping up to me, as that could be fun, 'cause especially since they are so highly ranked, so close to the number one, and they haven't fought each other yet, which is a little interesting. So it'd be fun. But my OG pick was gonna be Anthony Smith, the inevitable Thanos himself, because especially Khalil was already down in the rankings at 8. So Anthony Smith technically it's not weird for him to get this call up. And then Anthony Smith in his true fashion, he will get the upset win and then fight for the belt. And then he will get to take on Pereira and show that he is the best.
And there was one piece of the story that you forgot is that fight was booked, but they pulled Jamal out of it when they made the Glover fight on short notice. Because when the Jan and Magomed fight was a draw, then they called Glover, and then they called Jamal, and Jamal had a fight booked with Anthony. So they had to pull Jamal out of the Anthony fight. So they already had this booked once. This was on the radar once. They tried giving Jamal the Anthony Smith test, and they just threw him to the belt right away.
That's the answer.
They already knew. They're like, hey, you're probably gonna pass this. You can just get it.
Give them the Anthony Smith test. Rerun it, especially after Anthony Smith's last win.
Yes.
Oh, the other guy who came off a big win at, I want to say it was 301, Carlos Ulberg.
And that was my next one. Yeah.
Carlos Ulberg said he'd take the fight.
Okay.
So I think that Carlos Ulberg is, I don't want to say it's the worst case scenario but because that's kind of disrespectful, but I think it's the floor. Like if you were to look at the rankings and go, I'd like this guy, this guy, this guy. I think we get to the lowest we get is Carlos Ulberg in terms of options. So I think that Carlos Ulberg, maybe I'm wrong, but just he said he'd take the fight, and I imagine the UFC would have some I think that'd be smart for the UFC because Ulberg wins that. Now you've got another Australian who can fight on the card in Australia potentially. Coming off a win over former champion, very appealing. But I think there's a lot of options. It's just kind of a matter of which one are we going to go with, because the light heavyweight division always kind of has that why'd they book this fight? It never really 100% makes sense what they do with that division, and it's not their fault. That's the division. But I think we're just going to get to that at some point where, okay, we got the fight.
I agree with that. I'll just say real quick, I agree with that being the floor. I'm fine with reaching that low only because Khalil was already 8. So if you're going to go a little lower for replacement, I think it's still fair.
Mm-hmm. And short notice, it's got to happen.
When are we going to decide that and realize that someone's put a curse on the light heavyweight division? That there's never going to be any stability. It's just going to be chaos for all time.
Even when they had one of the most even when they had one of the most dominant champs of all time, he was fucking shit up and absolutely making a mess of it.
Yes.
Even when in theory it should have been the most stable, it was not. It's insane.
It's pure chaos.
Yep. All right. Jerry, you said there was some UFC Saudi Arabia news?
Yeah, because I think this fight, it's not the biggest news by any means, but it was just one of the fights that I'm pretty sure was on the main event. Sharabutin Magomedov, who was meant to fight Ihor Potieria, and Potieria is now pulled out and replaced by Jolinton Lutterbach. So not the biggest news, but I think that was one that was on the main card. So I don't know if it still will, but maybe that creates space for a more exciting fight in Saudi Arabia to open up that main card.
That's fair because we were joking, he already had that fight booked 2-3 weeks ago when he had to fight 3 weeks ago. So he probably good for him that didn't continue.
Yeah, I don't think he got cleared. Sharaputin called out Pereira because he was like, dude, you really, it's your fault I'm not fighting him. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird logic, but I mean, okay, if that's your grounds for a call out, you're supposed to fight the dude that he just beat the crap out of, and now he got the crap beat out of him, so he can't fight anymore. He can't make the date. But I actually did some research into the guy supposed to fight. He's probably a squash match. Wasn't in the UFC. He's got a decent record, but he's been doing karate and mixed rules and boxing and kickboxing, and then you go to his most recent MMA fights, and he's got fights at lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, and it's like, all right, what are we doing here? This is he's 38-10, so it looks fine on paper, but then they're in the octagon with each other, and it doesn't seem fair anymore. I think that's kind of what we got ourselves into here. And sure, Putin's loved over there, so they won't mind seeing him take the head off a guy that probably shouldn't be in the UFC. So I think that's kind of what we have got ourselves in for here.
Yeah, do you think they'll find another fight for that main card, or do you think they'll just throw that one on to open it up?
No, probably too late at this point because that is the.
Oh yeah, that's soon, isn't it?
Yeah, that's actually sneaking up pretty quick because that's the week before the Conor card. So I guess they could in theory.
That's right.
June 22nd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's already a pretty good fight night.
I was looking at that right now.
Solid. You've got a great main event, a really great co-main. Kelvin Gastelum fights. Johnny Walker is like your fourth fight down on him. Fight night's already good enough, so they may just go, the fifth fight kind of sucks, but you guys like the guy that's fighting, so we're fine with it. Like, I think that's kind of the direction they go.
I wish they would say that more on fight nights. The fifth card's the only one that sucks.
Yeah, it's not like, the co-main's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
It's like you got to get 5 fights down to find the kind of shitty fight.
Yeah, your co-main's Chaos Williams and Walter Harris. Let's get it. Are you guys surprised just on this one that Khamzat's as big a favorite as he is? His minus 220 is what I was seeing. Are you surprised that against Robert Whittaker? Because I'm feeling like hammering the Whittaker line.
I'm not surprised only because I feel like Chimaev always comes in as like an insane favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Whittaker doesn't really get the love on the betting odds all the time. So
yeah, it's tough because like in theory, I understand why he's that big, but I just watched him go to a really close fight where he didn't cover that big of a price tag. Like I think he was a little bit bigger of a favorite against Usman, and that ended up being a closer fight than it needed to be.
Usman also took that fight on 10 days, moving up in division.
He came off the couch.
Yeah, and now we got him in there with the welterweight who has good enough grappling defense, but there's always a chance he subs him in the first round. Like, I still don't know. To be honest, I don't know who I'm going to pick to win that fight. Sometimes I can tell a couple weeks out, but at this point, I'm not really sure. And another big favorite while we're on the topic, Sean Strickland, very big favorite to beat Paulo Costa.
Oh, damn.
You guys know my feelings on Sean Strickland, but he's like in that minus 200 to minus 225 range, and the line's very similar to what Paulo looked against Whittaker. And I think Whittaker's a tougher fight for him than Sean. So
I just did that same thing yesterday where I was looking. I just wanted to see what the Poirier line was looking like. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, sure, makes sense. And then I was like, why is Costa? I had to ask my friends. I was like, am I being biased or is that like should not be correct? But it is what it is.
Yeah. And every Sean Strickland fight, so almost all of them are close split decisions anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Like 90% of the time he fights to a close split decision. So like if you bet it and you're getting like a plus 180 underdog on a close split decision, like I'll take that.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you're gonna make profit more often than not if it's a close fight and you're on the guy who's almost 2-1.
Lock of the century though. Dustin Poirier plus 2,200 by submission.
Lock of the century is if they put out a line, will Dustin Poirier jump Gilly over or under, and it's set at a half, and
that would be
the
fun.
over will be hammered.
They should do an actual over under.
Yeah.
Could you? Oh my god!
If they wanted it to be accurate, the over under would have to be at like 4.5.
Yeah.
4.5 or 3.5. It
gives you a competitive. Dustin Poirier in the first exchange just jumps Gilly and submits him in the first round.
The first one's the best one. The first one is always the best Gilly.
Oh yeah, because they don't
see him progressively get worse. So it's like if he gets him, it will be on the first one. That's the funny part.
So maybe that's the way to do it. Dustin Poirier submission in round 1 plus 5,000.
Headline: Jumping Gilly is now the best base in UFC.
That's right. That's right. And thankfully, next week we have a pay-per-view to discuss. So next week we're here, and it isn't the best pay-per-view, but it's nice to have a pay-per-view to discuss, even if it is on the lower end. So that's on the docket for next week, and maybe it is Dustin Poirier by guillotine. You'll have to watch the show to find out our thoughts. But in all seriousness, no card this weekend, so no preview or best bets. Maybe there'll be a couple of UFC news articles. We'll have to wait and see what happens news wise. So no guarantees there, but at a minimum, we'll be back next week with our UFC 302 thoughts. All right, we will see you next week. Peace.